Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. Really pretty big week for the US. We're expecting some inflation data. And that's going to be very interesting, certainly with most analysts now expecting a little bit of a pickup in inflation. And that's obviously been reflected in rising interest rates out there, most noticeably in the 10-year. But as economies start to reopen, really there was an expectation there would be a little bit of a pickup in inflation. There's certainly pretty pent-up demand out there, a little bit of sort of stress on the supply chains as well. Now, also as well, we're coming into earnings season in the US, and that's going to be very important, not so much for the earnings, but really for the guidance going forward. To say, as these states are gradually reopening, it's just going to be very interesting to see the guidance now going forward. The US also been buoyed as well by comments from Fed Chair Powell. He expects the economy now to start picking up at a much faster rate. So it will be interesting to see what GDP comes out for the first quarter. Potentially that could be as high as sort of 7, 8, maybe even 9%. Because certainly quite a bit of good news seems to be priced in. US equities hitting fresh highs almost on a sort of weekly basis at present. Now that optimism is really obviously on the back of, say, states reopening and economies getting back up and running. The vaccine rolling out. US has got about 28% of the population vaccinated. They hit a bit of a milestone the other day with 4 million people vaccinated in one day. But the issue is, as the states are gradually reopening, there is a little bit of an increase in the COVID cases. Michigan had one of the highest recorded new case days for a long time, and now there's even a little bit of talk about potential sort of partial lockdowns again. So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Certainly the states need to reopen fully to get the economies back up and running. But to say with that reopening, there is an increase in cases as well. But it's not just the US. India is still a real hot spot. Brazil as well. But put it into context, India in one day had 169,000 new cases. Now, the big issue there is obviously just the sheer size of the population. They were talking about sort of increasing sort of vaccinations for age group 45 to 55. But the issue is that's 370 million people. Which obviously just can't get vaccinated overnight, not even in a week, a month. It will take at least a year, I think, to sort of vaccinate that number of people. UK as well celebrating sort of relaxation of COVID restrictions. People are now allowed to sort of get out, sort of go to restaurants, go to the pub, go shopping. But again, with those relaxations of the rules, we've seen a little bit of a spike in cases. So really, it's just a question of managing the sort of increase in cases. Certainly the vaccines do help, but it's not an overnight cure. It takes a long time to sort of vaccinate a population, and for the vaccinations to obviously become effective, it's just not an overnight process. But certainly there is renewed optimism out there, and certainly the world and the global economy is looking in a lot better state than they did sort of 3 to 4 months ago. Now Europe's still struggling. France, Germany, Italy seeing increased cases, and it's just going to be very interesting now. Obviously, heading into that sort of summer period, just to see the level of spread of the cases going forward, but also as well what sort of impact it has on the economies. Because certainly, the European sort of southern countries, sort of Spain, Greece, Portugal, etc., they need those tourists to come down and spend money to, pump money into their economy. Oil still tracking around sort of $60 a barrel on WTI. Getting closer now to the opening of the Trans-Tasman bubble with quarantine-free travel now between New Zealand and Australia, but more importantly, back from Australia back to New Zealand. But again, Australia running into a few issues with its vaccine. They've gone for the AstraZeneca, and potentially there are some issues there with sort of blood clotting in certain age groups. And again, they have looked to increase their sort of exposure to the Pfizer vaccine, but that's just sort of delayed the overall rollout. And it now looks unlikely that Scott Morrison's government will be able to get everyone vaccinated by the end of the year. Here in New Zealand, there's been a further case out there in the community from managed isolation facility, one of the security guards. And that has now seen that spread to another person in the community as well. Now that's raised fresh questions about the vaccinations for sort of frontline workers. Supposedly all MIQ workers were supposed to be vaccinated if they were on the front line. But also as well, question marks being raised about the vaccination rollout here in New Zealand, because again, at the current level, we're talking about over sort of 2 to 3 years to get everyone vaccinated. But certainly with the opening, say, of the Trans-Tasman bubble, sort of tourism operators are getting sort of, really pretty excited, and that should be a further boost to the New Zealand economy. Now that and global dairy prices as well for the year up just over 25%. That's all sort of good for the New Zealand economy, and it's ticking along at a reasonable rate. So now, if we can get things continuing as they are with sort of building projects, a little bit of infrastructure, say dairy is going okay, tourism's going to pick up, New Zealand economy outlook doesn't look too bad. But obviously still pretty tough out there for investors looking for income. Interest rates are low, and really you can't see any signs of interest rates increasing anytime soon. So given that, if you are looking for income, there are plenty of alternatives available out there, and go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.